Hey guys, Summer here, coming to you from Greensboro Downtown Yoga. And today on the Movement Mantra Project, we're going to be talking all about your wrist and hands. These super important areas of our body that we just kind of neglect and don't talk about on a regular basis. But they're super important, especially in your yoga practices, and for any of you who do dynamic yoga, especially where you've got those power times of vinyasa flows. Our wrists take a lot of that load in planks and downward dogs and chaturangas and everything. So let's look at how we can help keep our wrist happy and healthy. First thing I want you to do, bring your arms right here. So your hands are together and your elbows are touching. And then you're going to open your hands out to the side. Just kind of naturally go where they fall, right? And just notice and look at that. Pay attention if you've got one hand that's not necessarily parallel to the ground, or if you've got one like my hand over here where my fingers start to bend in. Kind of just pay attention to that, okay? Notice your natural. Then I want you to try to straighten your fingers and press your hands straight to the ground. And notice, do you start to feel tension or tightness anywhere when doing that? Does your thumb want to do something crazy? You might feel it into your forearms, you might feel it into your wrist. Okay, just kind of notice. Shake that out. This is such a good indicator of wrist tightness. For a lot of you might have found that you might have been here, and that is an indicator that your wrist, maybe from your time sitting on computers, phones, living daily life, have gotten really tight. And that's what we want to try to work on. So let's start off just making some wrist circles. And go both directions. Do a couple one way, a couple another way. You don't have to be going the same way. I think it can kind of be fun to go opposite directions. It's kind of like the pat the head, rub the tummy thing. Can you do it? I don't know. Try it. As you're moving this, just notice, do you start to feel tension and tightness into those wrists as you're doing it? You might even start to hear some like pops and crackles, and just, again, notice it. All right, so get that movement. You want to go for about 30-ish seconds of this circling wrist movement. And then you're going to take your hands, and we're going to make this kind of like hang 10 position. I want you to just shake and shake. And we're trying to really get that vigorous movement into our wrists and flow so that when we are on our wrist, we have blood flow into those areas. So that should feel kind of nice as we just move and move and move and move and move. The more we move, the more blood is starting to come into those areas. So go again, about 30-ish seconds here of shaking vigorously into the hands, and then stop. And notice if your hands feel a little tingly. And that's, again, that kind of blood flowing into that area, and I think it's kind of an interesting feeling. Now what you're going to do, take your hands into fist, and I want you to just flick. And as you do that, try to get as much space between each finger as you can. Get that real big flick. I do this in counterflow yoga, and I talk about how we're throwing glitter onto the floor, right? It's like, whew, throw that glitter. And that's what you want to feel like. Maybe, I don't know, if you like to throw glitter. I have no idea why that's what comes to my brain. Do about 3 more times. Just settle your hands. And that's just getting movement into our joints. Now let's try to just tap and tap and tap and tap. And make this little tapping movement of your fingers trying to come to that kind of base of the hand. And notice how one side is compared to the other. You can do it here, kind of whatever feels nice to you. It might be beneficial to do one hand at a time, because then you can really notice what one side feels and then the other side feels, right? And again, start to notice, are you feeling this into your wrist, into your forearms, anywhere like that? Maybe you feel it in this part of your hand, or maybe your thumb doesn't want to do that movement. Especially if you start to get arthritis in your hands, this can be a really difficult movement. And unfortunately, that becomes really sad, because then it becomes harder to open doors and such like that, right? Next thing I want to do is just a little hand massage for ourselves. So you're going to take one hand and place it flat, and take the opposite hand And with your thumb and first finger, you're gonna just kind of squeeze into the space between your thumb and your first finger on that hand. And you can kind of rub it up and down, you can squeeze it. Just notice if you're holding on to any tightness or tension right there as you do that. Okay. And again, this is something 10, 15 seconds. The longer you get more comfortable with it, maybe you're going 30 seconds to a minute. And you want to just take the opposite thumb and press into your hand. And as you're pressing into that hand, just kind of notice again where your areas of tenderness. So is it down here in the palm? Is it more up in the fingers? And then actually go into your fingers as well. You can get that movement. And go onto the front of your hand and do the same thing. Kind of get that massage. For me, I kind of like to take and flip it over and do these like sweeps down. It's just like, that feels so nice, right? When was the last time you did something like this on your hand and tried to really get a good massage into your own hand? Let's take and do the opposite hand. So same thing, feel that pinch. And I am much tighter on this side than I am on the other side, which there's some other things that we could discuss that I don't want to get into on this video, but why that area is really tight as well. But for now, let's just focus in on giving yourself that little massage, and maybe in a later movement mantra we'll talk about that. Find through that press. And then let's again take your thumb and start to massage into your hand. And feel where you're holding that tension. More often than not, your dominant hand is going to be tighter than your non-dominant hand, right? Because we use it more. So thus it builds tension and it holds on to stuff in a way that our other hand doesn't necessarily do. Again, go up into the fingers, into those joints right there. And then take your hand, and I'm gonna go with my sweeps down this side. And then I want us to focus in, so that was the hands, right? Now let's just do a couple of those glitter throws one more time and notice the difference. So big deep inhale, exhale, throw. For me, it feels a lot nicer. I feel like I can get more spread in between my fingers. I hope you can too. Let's do two more. Let's look a little bit at our wrists and forearms. So now we're gonna just take our hand and you get this kind of all four fingers and you go up and down the length of your arm. You have lots of tendons, your extensor and flexor tendons and ligaments in your arm right here that we're trying to kind of go in between. We're trying to massage into the big muscles in that area of your arm as well. You can go down into your elbow. For any of you who might have ever experienced what they call tennis elbow, this is also an important thing that you could do. Bring it onto the front of your arm right here, where we go up and down our arm with this same kind of nice feel. Then take your knuckles and swipe down. Take the opportunity to do our foot-focused one, and you'll notice the similar type of feel. And this is all your self-myofascial release. So we're trying to really break down those adhesion barriers that line and cover our muscles with these kind of sweeps. Big sweep down, right there. And I should note too, I'm sitting like this because this is a comfortable way for me to sit. You could be sitting in a chair, sitting on your couch to do all this. You do not have to be on the floor in this weird little 90-90 position. Just putting that out there. Let's do the other side. So start off with the all four fingers and just kind of massage up and down. So it's been interesting. Over the last couple of years, I've dealt with a lot of neck pain, and I've been in and out of doctors, in and out of physical therapists, and no one could really kind of figure out what was going on. And one of the things I was noticing in my yoga practice was that down this arm, when we would do like overhead stuff, I would get tingly into this hand. And I finally, most recently, after tearing a ligament in my neck, unfortunately, found a physical therapist who was able to kind of pinpoint down and found that I was actually holding a lot of tension in my mid to upper back, which was causing that tingly down the arm. It's an interesting thing to think about because so often all of us hold tensions to the other side of our arm in our mid and upper back that we don't realize might actually impact some of these areas. And same thing with this. You may not realize that you are holding tension in your forearm, which is why your hands and wrist hurt in planks and things like that. So just know that. Let's take our knuckles and swipe. And I've said this, and I always kind of find, I'm one of those people, I always say I'm kind of an open book, and I think that I've experienced a lot of injuries and a lot of illnesses which have kind of led me to become the teacher, the educator, the person that I am today. And so I share those with you, not because I'm like, oh, please know my personal history, but to know that, I'm human just like you, and that they have made an impact and have allowed me to become stronger mentally and physically and knowledge-wise than I was. So let's do one more. And then just kind of big sweeps down. And again, notice, did one side feel tighter to you than the other? Probably. Take your hands now for me, and I want you to just, actually I'm gonna keep saying like I was, press down into your palms like this. For me, it's kind of comfortable to sit here. You could do this sitting at a table. And what I want you to do is you're gonna rock forward and then rock backwards. Notice the fingertips. They're trying to point as close into my body as possible. And I'm going forward and backwards, kind of getting that stretch into this area of my arm. And for those of you sitting right here trying to read my tattoo, because I know I get that a lot, it says my story, not mystery. Listen to our movement mantra video, and you'll find out some of the story behind that. Let's do one more. And just settle back, sit for a moment. Circle your wrist again. That's a deep loading into that wrist joint. And it feels nice after we've done a lot of that movement. So you could start your yoga practices, get into the studio 5 to 10 minutes early, do some of this movement type stuff that we just did, come into that, and then you'll find, hopefully, maybe, that your chaturangas, your downward dogs, your planks don't put as much pressure into that wrist. Last thing I want you to do. I'm going to show you this from the side right here. You're going to bring your palms so they face away from you. You're going to press them into the ground, so fingers are away from you. Palms press into the ground, and then we're opening our chest right here by squeezing our shoulder blades. For any of you who've ever done a reverse plank, maybe a crab, this is a variation. It's a seated one where all we're trying to do is get a little bit of now lean back and forth to where you're getting movement into that wrist. And you'll notice with a lot of things that I show you and how I talk, I add in that element of movement. You can rest. And versus just like a static hold, right? Like we could have just done this to try to stretch out that wrist joint versus being here, leaning back and forth. And there's a lot of research, there's a lot of discussion out there now that around the benefit of what we call dynamic movement or dynamic stretching. Static stretching, such as holding a stretch in place, is absolutely still valuable. There's big benefit in doing this. However, there's even more when we get that movement into those joints, because movement is mobility in our joints, whereas holding this static stretch is just flexibility into a muscle. So it's a little bit different way to think about it, but has huge value in why I didn't just have you do this, but instead I had you lean back and forth. So I hope that your wrists feel a little bit happier. Oh, let's do a test. Let's actually see. Let's fling our hands right here and go back. Do you notice, ooh, look at mine, my fingers are now straight, right? Without having to force it. I hope yours are too, or at least a little bit better than where they were when you first started. The more you do that, the happier and healthier your wrist will become, and the easier it will be to do your regular yoga and movement practices. Until next time, I'm Summer. Bye.